Hi, everybody. Welcome to another session in Awaken and Unleash Your Inner Power Retreat. We have Nichole Kuechle here. Hi, thank you so much for being on today.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to speak to you. She is the founder of Method of Intentional Inquiry. She teaches muscle testing, and we're going to be bridging how to connect your intuition using your body, using muscle testing. What a fascinating subject. I've heard so much about muscle testing and how it's a subconscious way of understanding where you want to go. Like your body will actually tell you what direction and choice to make. Is that right?
Yes.
To a certain extent.
Yes, to a certain
From what
extent.
I know.
Yeah. You're in the wheelhouse.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm so excited to actually ask you questions because I know the body has a lot to do with what we really feel. The body will keep the score. The body will reveal to us where we really are instead of where the mind is telling us to go. And we're talking about intuition, which is such a sacred place of our inner truth, away from everybody else's opinions, away from preconceived notions and conditioning, the ultimate nucleus of who we are. The body will connect to the intuition. So my question to you is, how do you begin tapping into your intuition as a muscle testing practitioner?
So we all have intuition. We all have access to our intuition. What I hear a lot of practitioners say is like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what information you're talking about. I really just think it's a matter of getting quiet. If you're not aware of it, get quiet and you get present to it really quickly. But a story I often tell when I'm teaching is I've seen and heard things since I was a kid and thought that I was a little strange and wasn't always taken seriously when I would report what I'm hearing or seeing, or dreaming. It would occur, things would occur like recurrent dreams or recurrent nightmares or whatever scenes I would call them, because I'm like, there's that one again. Like, what is this, right? Or deja vu, like those kinds of experiences. But I started to recognize when I really started to hone in on, is this me? Like, am I consciously, intentionally asking questions that I'm like, so this wouldn't be consciously or intentionally, but am I like asking questions as I'm muscle testing for other things, like using vials and I'm looking for other things, and then I'm getting information. So I had to like, clear my head enough to be like, okay, I'm just testing and I'm just going to use the vials, and the vials are going to tell me, what's going on in the body. But when I kind of discerned, when I started to separate, what I saw fascinated me because I've been seeing it for years. Is I'll get pictures like out here to my right, but they come in through my right ear. And then I see words like a ticker tape across my forehead. And I remember kind of going like, oh, it's time to face the music. Like, it's time to embrace the weird, the strange, like the woohoo. I wanted to, it's like there was so much good information in it, but I found myself not like not wanting to believe it, but not acknowledge it actually. So I'd see this stuff while working with a client or while like listening to a client and I'm getting information. I had to start realizing that I don't have to do anything with it. I can let it be, but I can also just sort of jot a couple of things down so that I'm present to it. And I realized I have a choice. I have a choice in allowing it to come in. I have a choice in truly tapping into my mission. My experience growing up was just like information coming at me from everywhere and just kind of overwhelmed everywhere I went.
Yeah.
And like, the whole kind of meme, I was yesterday years old when I was like, wait a second, I can actually choose to, turn it off and be like, not open for business, right? Not interested, not at the moment, whatever the case may be. And that was truly the moment that I sort of like stepped into freedom. That's what it felt like as a practitioner. Cause I was like, oh, we first had to honor that. And then I had to give it space. Like, so it, you know, it has space to be acknowledged, but can set patiently over to the side until or unless I need it and want to tap into it. Yeah. Cause otherwise it was just like being bombarded with information. So when someone's like, I don't really know, like, what are you talking about? It's like, I can't like remember swimming in that.
It's important to know how to organize that information as you're conditioning. Otherwise, it's just a big bubble of blub, right? And we need to discern and understand the information, and that's a skill that we learn down the line when we tap fully, even deeper into our intuition. So what you're describing is a very relatable process, I think, to many people who have first acknowledged they have a gift of picking information up. And by the way, we all have gifts. We all have them. It's not a special snowflake syndrome gift. No. So I just want to say that now. This is not something that you're just born with. Sure. Some people are more developed in this area than most. It's because they have actively chosen to also develop that as well. But for the most part, I agree with you in that we all can pick up information, and either you choose to let it go and not do anything with it, or you put it to the side and weave it into your work, whatever it is that you do. So how did you cross the bridge or connect the dots between intuition and being in medicine?
So I will tell you, it was pre-pandemic, and I was teaching for a muscle testing training company, and so not only was I teaching for them, but I was, you know, using the method in my practice, and valid and awesome, and it did great things for my practice. It did great things for me as a clinician. But I got frustrated really often with this sense of this person is testing in a state of stress again. And I was always left with like, well, like what kind of stress? There's like emotional stress, and there's like digestive stress, and do you know what I mean? And I'm kind of like, if you say rice, I'm like, what kind of rice? There's a lot of rice, right? So I'm always like, what are you actually talking about? How deep are we going to go with this? And in that training, we were taught to, so this particular thing test, you supplement it. Fine. Like that's the whole idea. People are seeking out this work medication to reverse chronic and degenerative diseases, to handle stress, right? And my frustration was people would already have, you know, 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 or 13 or my gosh, even more sometimes, supplements on their body to handle the things that are coming up in test kits, toxins, pathogens, etc. And then we would hit this like, you know, roadblock, and it'd be like, oh, there's that stress again. So apply another supplement to support the stress, and then see them at their next visit and see, like, here they are again, like head against a garage door. They're frustrated. I'm frustrated. And what I started to see was like, I was given a limitation and I accepted it. Problem number 317, you know, like we don't do that work here. There's no way to assess the kind of stress, the amount of stress, and the part that's frustrating for me is, you know, you just get, in my line of work anyway, you get to know your clients so well. It's like going to get your hair cut. You know, you're like, blah, 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 as they're doing your hair. All of it comes out on the table. So I'm aware of, you know, the dog died 2 weeks ago and the divorce papers were just sent to the office, and you know, they're empty nesters now. And they're like, I'm super present to what they're dealing with. And even when they haven't said what's going on, it's oozing out of their pores, and it's showing up everywhere in their muscle testing. So it's like, if you're paying attention at all, there's no way around it. There's like, it's kind of like a white elephant. So I could just be like, okay, we are not moving forward until you got to give me something. I don't need to know details, but like, is there some big thing going on? And then the tears start. Of course. Or they start shaking, or they just hold my hand and close their eye. And it's like, okay, got it. All right. thank you. Like, cause I'm over here getting a lot of like feedback, right?
Mhm.
And the frustrating thing was then I started like, so I would put the supplement on, and like I said, they would come back the next week and kind of be in the same spot, or come back in 2 weeks. And I was like, this is so frustrating because
Mhm.
nothing's moving. And
Right.
I'm a big fan of like, let's transform.
Right. You want
Right, let's disappear. Let's make connections. Let's have aha moments.
Mhm.
And and so I just remember thinking like it made me realize it felt like I was just barely keeping people above water because stress was already mounting up so much. And then you put the pandemic on top, like we didn't even
Yeah.
know that was coming, right?
Yeah.
So I just was like, and it has to change. Like, I'm just going to start doing things differently, like playing with it while people are on the table or while I'm on, virtual calls with them or Zooms with them to, and I know I can play because I know my people. So I could be like, I just went to this training, which I'm always at some kind of training to learn to integrate and all of that.
Mhm.
Or some kind of personal growth thing. And I share that because if I'm excited about it and I share it, they're excited to hear for themselves what I got, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
and that just creates that like
Integrity.
relatedness and that total heart space connection with your people without getting too personal even.
Absolutely.
So I started to like, I literally would make up hand modes. Like, how some people have to, in order to remember a last name or to remember an address, they have to play a game in their head.
Yeah.
In it a certain way, and then they're like, that's how I remember things. So I just started to go like, okay, well, if I do this, it means this. If I do this, it means that. Like, it's almost a way of establishing like another way of a yes or a no with muscle
Mhm.
testing, and just like practiced it and just made it be like that's going to be the answer. And then I just started asking different questions. If stress came up, instead of asking, like, instead of having it be an automatic go-to that we're going to stress reduction support supplement on your program, I started asking like, yes or no, is this a supplement handling, or is this like a modality handling, right? Like, does hypnotherapy test as the best way to help resolve the kind of stress we're facing? Would Reiki be that answer? Acupuncture, working on different meridian lines, would EFT be the way around it? Because there's like a plethora of options out there for people who are like, I've tried everything. You haven't.
Yeah.
You just haven't,
Uh-huh. And muscle testing is a good way to look at all of the variety of modalities and which one out of those 6 is the right fit for somebody. Because for me, EFT might work, for the next person who's dealing with a similar situation may not be. So basically, muscle testing can cut time and go directly to what you need, straight.
Yeah. So it's kind of about,
I don't know what that means.
How clear are
If you
your or like
search
how,
for it before.
gosh, my little Siri
I
just came
started
up with-
asking like, yes.
How
We can
clear-
ask her questions too, Siri. Like, what do you think?
Seriously, let's get some info
Should we
here.
muscle test Siri right now on the phone?
Like, how clear are your questions? What is it that you're asking? Because when I'm teaching and I'm walking around the room when practitioners or providers are drilling, and a lot of times what I see is they're like leaning in for the muscle test before the question's even been asked. And so they're just like, I can't get this, there isn't a lock, or there isn't a whatever, or I'm super confused. And, can you do it so I can see? And my answer is usually not, let me show you. It's, I want to see your process. So establish that lock muscle, like, what's step 1, what's step 2, what's step 3, because I can usually see where the breakdown is. They're moving too fast. They're not clear in their question. So definitely no consistent results will come from that.
That makes sense.
And that is really interesting to see. Also, though, it's like anybody in a healing modality, like, of course, we have the intention to do well and obviously to do no harm, but we also come with a specific skill set. You as a hypnotherapist, right?
Yeah,
you come with a certain skill set, knowledge, database, ability, and then the chiropractor that I'm working with comes with the different skills. So that's also one of my favorites, is when any of my students are asking me questions, I need to know first, like who are you? What's your background? Because how I answer that question is going to matter based upon like, where are they coming from and how are they taking muscle testing and how are they going to apply it? Because I just don't buy that it's like there's just one way to learn and this is the only modality, right? Which is why I was like, if I don't coin this, the method of intentional inquiry, like I have failed, because inside of it, it's like permission granted to kind of take it and do with it what makes sense for you. You just need access to that. You can ask certain questions that you it's beneficial to have somewhat of a framework to know like what it is you're dealing with. And also listen for the feedback. So is the feedback coming from the muscle test, or did you happen to like say the question out loud and the client or the person is like, you know?
How does your muscles show you a yes or no? How does that process actually work with the client?
So it depends on if you're in person or working virtually. So a lot of people have learned that when they learn in person that they've got
right. I've seen this
outstretched and they apply, you know, so standardly a lock muscle is like your yes. Unlock would be no. So also they would say like strong, weak, but it's not a muscle strength test. It's not like how strong is my bicep, right? It's the strength of the reflex. It's the strength of it's like that, right? And there's no sort of, it's a really, once you are quite certain about what you're doing, it's a very clear yes and a very clear no. However, in my work, this is why you need to be clear about what you're asking, because I may be looking for a no as my yes. Does that make sense?
Right, but the client doesn't know that because you know.
Not necessarily.
Right, you're picking up certain information from them that they may not be privy of to your process.
It could be, yeah, unless we are talking out loud. Now, if you're working virtually, there are a lot of different ways of muscle testing. So like self-testing methods. So you could do like this one, you know, this one. I use my pointer finger becomes the lock muscle that I check. My middle finger becomes the thing that I'm applying pressure to. So you get a lock or an unlock. That's how I spend my day. I also do a snap if I get tired, a lock and an unlock, but people will like rub, they'll flick. There's like no end to me. I mean, a lot of years ago, I learned from this 88-year-old woman that used to live way up north by my parents' cabin. I was just always like fascinated. She was like a mystic, you know, I just like loved being around her. And I'd follow her around the grocery store because she'd be like making this clicking noise. And it like, fast forward a decade and a half or something. And no, she was like muscle testing with her tongue.
Oh my God.
I know. And I like the minute I realized that, I was like, no way. So there's really no end.
Is it like that?
So it's a little like how I've sorted it out for myself is if you're sucking on a lozenge, right, your tongue is kind of pushing to the roof of your mouth. And so if you're doing like that kind of suck up and back, so like if you say my name is Nichi, that's a yes. So it's not going to snap, but say my name is Sarah, I can't hold that.
Wow. Okay.
Right? Like, but it's one of those things where even my kids will say like, Mom, stop testing. And I don't realize that I'm like doing a thing down here at my side as I'm wherever we are. So it kind of just becomes a second language to me. So I'll say to people like, okay, well, you speak Chinese. I speak muscle testing.
That is fascinating. The language
easily.
It's like a dance.
Yeah, oh, totally a dance.
There's a choreography that you wow.
Which is hysterical because I'm not a good dancer. That's like I could totally flow.
Could do. Wow, that's amazing. So there's a lot of information that you can gather from
there is.
That, you know, well, I'm curious, I'm sure you have clients who are resistant to knowing the truth, right? Like they know that they want to break through something, but their ego is like, I know the answer, I just don't want to.
Or it doesn't feel safe.
Yeah. And have you dealt with clients who are ready to break through, they're resistant, and then you find the resistance in their body, and you in their body, it shows you yes or no.
Mm-hmm.
And you tell them, hey, like it's a no, but then they're like, but no, it's a yes. Because
Mm-hmm.
there's a cognitive dissonance somewhere happening, but the body's saying one thing, the mind is trying to control it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's not uncommon to have like this conscious thought about, let's just take like knee pain, for example, right? They're just like, oh, this knee is killing me, and blah, blah, blah. And like my PT says it's this, and the orthopede says it's this, and my chiropractor says it's this, and it doesn't make sense. And as their practitioner, I might be looking back in their health records, like what are patterns that may have come up in the past? Were there ever any injuries, you know, anything like that? But then I can apply my, you know, so I have a lot of kits that have vials of, like I said, toxins, pathogens and whatnot. And I have kits that are just full of emotions. And so if that emotions kit tests on that area, we know that this is an emotional issue. And, you know, some will say like, well, do you need vials to do this? No, you don't. But I'm a big fan of, I think starting with vials helps to create this like proving for yourself as a practitioner. Like there's an energy behind every word. There's an energy behind every vial, every pathogen, every toxin that you're testing. So it just gets you like, there's something palpable about it. And then I didn't intend on memorizing all these kits. I didn't sit down and study them, but I realized I could see them.
When you say vial,
Yeah.
as in
like a little vial.
like it's like a blood vial.
They're not blood, they're just like an energetic
They look
imprint.
like blood vials to me. That's why I was like, oh, that's a blood
Sorry,
vial.
no, they're like an inch, you know, inch and a half long.
Mm.
And a lot of muscle testing practitioners will use them. They'll have, you know, kits that are foods, toxins, pathogens. And from there, you can find, say, what area of the body goes weak for that particular vial.
I see.
Right. But you can do the same thing on an emotional level and find out, you know, you can have someone be like, I don't know where this pain is coming from. And, you know, it's interesting. It started after my boyfriend moved out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and as a practitioner, you're like, oh, like, you know, like your antenna goes up, like, say more. Like, when was that? And then just sometimes by just asking questions and muscle testing along as they're answering, you can be like, that right there, like something about that conversation you had right before he walked out the door. So like, how did that make you feel? What showed up for you in that moment?
So you are in a session and you can pick up where grief lives in a body. You can pick up where sadness lives in a body.
Mm-hmm. So what's fascinating is you know, like one of my favorite lines is we have issues in our tissues. I learned that at age 20 in a, you know, 18-month comprehensive bodywork program. I was like, ooh, I like the ring to that. And boy, does it make sense. And like every decade I move deeper into this work, it makes more and more sense. And holds more weight, right? So yes, any emotion can be held anywhere in the body. And then just through various trainings and like, you know, grief sits in the lungs and fear sits in the kidneys and resentment sits in the gallbladder and anger sits in the liver. And when you see people express like the deficiencies get expressed in the body as certain physical manifestations that we call symptoms out here, right? That's the chirp. And that's the pain point. So people can be in a headache pain point, or they can be in I've been sobbing for 3 days because I just ended this relationship thing. And now I have a physical pain that I can't figure out. And when we bring our test kits to it, or just the question asking and muscle testing to find, sure, could this be a structural issue? Absolutely. It's not to say that there isn't. But when we're able to use muscle testing to test, like, say, percentages. So like, what is the percentage yes out of 100 that this is an emotional issue that you're dealing with on the, you know, on the knee? And you watch them just like, bing, you watch that, it's that awareness. That's so much fun. Cause you know, like they know that you know that they know.
Yeah. And
right?
they feel so seen. right? In that moment, they're like, oh, that's what it really is. I feel so understood. And then the
Yes.
healing happens and there's less pain just naturally, right?
Naturally. So one of my favorite things is, because sometimes you'll have like the partner in the room, and
Mhm.
I actually really love that scenario, even if it's on Zoom, because it's just playful and you can kind of like lean into like, so
Yeah.
she's like, this is what she's got going on. How does she sleep? How does she really sleep? Right. And he'll be like, she snores every night, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like, but I love that because they sort of tell on each other, and it becomes a playful way of helping them to, like, helping the partner to see, from my perspective, the physical manifestation shows up as whatever it shows up as. This is what they're dealing with. And it's not like, when you come home from something, you're trying to tell somebody about it and they're like, this makes no sense. And
Yeah.
you're like, but I wish you were there. Right? You would have heard it all. So
Right.
in those moments, like my favorite is when you can bring awareness to, it's literally a simple acknowledgement, right? Of like, what if we just acknowledge this pain for a second, versus like putting a cream on it and sending you to a body worker who's going to dig into it, and it feels good for a minute and you go home 2 hours later and you're right back in it. So is there a way to like be with it and connect with it and acknowledge it, right? That a lot of times just the connection of what is this percentage yes out of 0 and 100, that this is emotional, and let's say it's 80% yes is different than a 10% yes,
Right.
right? So now we're like, oof, like this is really carrying some weight. When did this start? Well, it started about a week after my boyfriend moved out. Okay, so then what is the percentage yes that this has to do with the ending of that relationship, or the now that I live alone, whatever the case may be. And when you just watch, again, like I said, the little, like, the wow, I
Mhm.
call it, like, it's the thing that it's does a couple of things. I look at it like it's the thing that gives it shines the light or gives life to what they've been carrying that they were unaware of. And simply by going like, oh,
Mhm.
that little action alone, that little connection, that little bit of dialogue you just had could completely disappear.
Yeah.
Like, that's what's crazy, is like something that might have taken hours of therapy, talk therapy, art therapy, hypnotherapy, like who knows? Not that these aren't valid and we need to do these things to support ourselves, but when we can have somebody walking the walk and truly just being mindful and aware, and taking advantage, but like acknowledging those moments as they arise.
Right.
In muscle testing, like, you're not someone on your table most of the time anyway who's just not in flow with you. And
Yeah.
so they're like, hey, do your thing. I'm here for my checkup. I'm here for my follow-up, whatever. Like, this is better and that's better. And like, my period was awful, but whatever. I was traveling, right? You do your thing. And as a practitioner, there's a process, like there's a framework that we follow and use, not all the same for each of us,
Mhm.
but we know when we bump into, like, we're like, here's a detour. Wow, here's a block. Like, what's going on here? And it's the engagement of that. If we just blew by it and we're like, well, here's a supplement for that part of the body and that issue, we're kind of band-aiding it.
Mhm. I love that
And
because
that's where I was like, there's a breakdown here if we're not actually going into conversation around it.
absolutely, absolutely. I think the neuro-linguistic part, the process of connecting our pain body to our emotional body and becoming cognizant of the pain, then tying the dot to the pain and the emotion is it's a full 360, full circle moment. And we have a moment then in that situation to become conscious of the unconscious. And if we just isolate the pain body and then isolate the emotional body, like we go to a therapist and we go to a doctor, they're almost
But we're just being sorted out like at a hospital.
yeah, it's not fully integrated. We need to integrate the mind, the body with the soul, all three of the Holy Trinity, right? And I love that you're mentioning this because I've seen this really work miraculously also on my clients too, where they go, I have this muscle pain, and I would say, okay, and I would help them close their eyes in hypnotherapy and go, can you tell me what this really feels like emotionally? And where does it also live in the body? When memory comes up, tears start going. The healing happens immediately.
Oh, cool.
When you go to a physician, they don't have sometimes even the emotional capacity or the training to say, hey, what's going on here? They just refer you to somebody else, which is fine. It's our Western world. It's our we need our bodies treated sometimes too. But what I'm saying here is that when we bind the two components, the way that you're mentioning it, it really is a miraculous way of healing, almost instantaneously, and quicker. So I also imagine that you uncover programs with your clients. How can one release those old programs of thinking, of feeling, because they come back and back and back and back to your office and they go, well, my pain's back. So chronic pain, it can be chronic emotional pain that they're not letting go of. So how can some people think about releasing old programs?
So there's a couple ways. I mean, there's a couple ways of going about it. Some, it's like the mindset work of finding limiting beliefs, limiting circumstances, conversations, watching how they muscle test in response to that. A lot of times, I love just testing as they're talking. So they're over here talking, and I'm over here, whoa, like, what did you just say? Like it's usually a super specific, just to give you an example, I work with a lot of pediatrics and, mom will get on Zoom and be like, oh, okay, he's complaining of his stomach ache again. And I'm like, this is strange. All the things we've been working on, like the numbers are moving down. We shouldn't be seeing this symptom anymore. I wonder what this is about, but like his emotional score is up. So that's curious to me. Then I'll say things like, what is he saying about, like, and then she'll say something like, well, it's funny you say that because he came downstairs and said like, oh, my stomach feels like it's, gurgling a lot. And I'm going like, oh, like gurgling, like that was the language of the child. That is the subconscious that I need to connect with because that child's at school and I'm on Zoom with mom. So there's so many ways that you can use muscle testing to like access and support and validate and a lot of it was just not taught to me. A lot of it was just listening and kind of going like, why do I get this nudge that I need to try this thing or test this thing or ask this question, and allowing myself to not feel limited. Like I said, I was working with a company that I realized I had accepted the limitation of here's how we do things. Again, like that worked for a while, totally worked for me for a while. And I just outgrew it. Right. I outgrew it and I needed to be in a place where I don't have limitations. Like I work 100% virtually, for crying out loud. So there went the limitation of time and distance and, all of that. So there's a lot to be said about who can use muscle testing, what you can access with muscle testing. One of the questions I get from practitioners and providers is like, well, how do you measure this, which is what we teach. We like apply. I mean, so some of it is like the percentage range, you can use that. And for some, we just like give it a spectrum. Nothing is higher than this, nothing is lower than this. And you see where your grief falls in that spectrum. We know how much work we have to do. So that way I know if your needle is here, but it needs to be here to be like, I don't want to say asymptomatic, but to have the experience of having like, let it go. Right. Then I can give you that visual measure. I can tell you, well, like here it was at 740 and we need that to be down to like 240 where you're going to start feeling better. And these numbers are just made up. But once you're applying this with people over time, you see the synchronicities of like, oh, interesting. There are no symptoms anymore at 700. So if they're complaining about something, it's something new or it's another layer because the cough is gone, the blah, 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 and this number is moving in the right direction. And so it's tricky when we're using like electronic health records and there are boxes and columns and things are pre-done. And, we've had the ability to always customize what we use for our electronic health records. And, and I'm half the time I am typing in my own little made up shorthand because I'm the only one who needs to know what my notes mean. and,
Right.
say from visit to visit. And there's so much freedom in all of that. I'm not treating, I'm not diagnosing, I'm not prescribing. I'm letting you know what energies are in the way of you achieving this optimal health on a body, mind, and spirit level, period.
And when you give them
You
the
get to choose to accept those suggestions and recommendations.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it takes it takes bravery and courage. But yes, I have this issue and I'm going to move through that. What is the next step that you see your clients do when you assess that they have grief or sadness living in the body and you list all the symptoms? What's next then?
So we clear it.
Clear it.
Yeah. So there are a lot of ways that you can apply muscle testing to clear emotions. Some of them will stay away or gone for good. And some you're like, oh, there it is. There it is again. There's that little grief guy again, right?
It's the body muscle testing to release the grief.
Yeah. So I use other tools too. I use some I'm not trained in tapping, but there are just areas of the body that I've learned,
Meridians.
You can tap, you can use a lasering certain areas of the body. A lot of it too, you can just put the body in like this seems to like oversimplify it, but sometimes you just have the right person and you could just kind of talk them into a quiet meditative state.
Yeah. And
just keep having them repeat that statement that previously was weak, and then all of a sudden it just gets stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger, and they're holding, and there's just a shift in getting present to what's not working and getting present to what it is that they want. So, and I've got a very background of training, so in my teaching, I will share like this piece of what I'm teaching you I learned somewhere else. I'm not, licensed or contracted to teach any of the work that I have previously taken. But it's no different than, back 27 years ago when I became a body worker. It's the massage that I gave or the craniosacral therapy session that I gave became mine because of who I am, because of what comes through me, because of who I'm being, because of what I add into my session.
Yeah.
And that's what I've discovered is the method of intentional inquiry became like a philosophy. It became a conversation based upon how it is that I do what I do. And I realized I needed to teach it. I have so many, I'm like a practitioner's practitioner. And when they're on my table, they're like, how did you know that? How did you find that? Can you teach this? Can you share with me? Can I shadow you? Can I watch this? And so much of it happens up here. Right. In the asking and the muscle testing. So honestly, the hardest part is like the slowing down and getting present to, and sharing sort of step by step. Here's a framework that you can use to access that information.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for coming on today, sharing your information, sharing your stories, sharing and even introducing this modality of muscle testing that I find very interesting and mystical even. And it was so great to know more today. What is the gift that you have to share with us?
Oh gosh. So I took my practitioner hat off. I work half with practitioners and half with kind of the mom baby crowd. And I realized what was really needed is sort of like an at-home healthcare guide done our way, right? Done from like, how do I prevent, how do I support, how do I maintain, and how do I use my village and the things I have access to do that. So I took off my practitioner hat, put on my mom hat, and have laid out this great PDF of, you can walk into your little local drugstore and buy this little thing that you thought was for old people, and you can actually use it when you and your whole family feel like you're getting sick. And we talk about how to use it. So how to get access to some of these things that we don't feel like we have access to being a non-practitioner, and realizing you can go to Amazon and you can find these things, learn how to use it, and essentially build your own at-home toolkit.
I love that. You give somebody the freedom to learn and take action for themselves to reclaim their health, their body, and their sovereignty to heal themselves. I love
that. Right? Who knew?
Who knew? Who knew? But this is what we're doing.
That's a possibility.
When we are talking about awakening and unleashing your power, that means taking the power back to your body, learning what supplements are, learning that medicine, certain kinds of medicine can absolutely heal certain parts of any ailments, and so can emotional healing and muscle testing. Thank you so much, Nichole, for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time. Bye.